Hello, and welcome to I Hated That Book, a podcast where a woman unapologetically in her rage era rants about the books she can't escape. Recently, I realized that not everyone is like me and a manic completionist who reads over 100 books a year and doesn't DNF any of them, even though I hate so many of them. So I decided, because I'm not going to start DNFing things, why don't I just make a podcast to complain about these books that I read that I hate because they're crap and they're selling well and I need to vent. Today we're going to be covering The Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan, the book 1 in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. This book was first published in February 4th, 2014. It's book 1 of 5 in the Natural History of Dragons series, and it was nominated for a Hugo Award. So on Goodreads, I'm seeing that we have 43,000 reviews, an average of 3.83, and over 10,000 5-star reviews. The little blurb, I'm just going to read the little blurb. All the world, from Skirland to the farthest reaches of Ariga, know Isabella Lady Trent to be the world's preeminent dragon naturalist. She is the remarkable woman who brought the study of dragons out of the misty shadows of myth and misunderstanding into the clear light of modern science. But before she became the illustrious figure we know today, there was a bookish young woman whose passion for learning, natural history, and yes, dragons, defied the stifling conventions of her day. Here, at last, in her own words, is the true story of a pioneering spirit who risked her reputation, her prospects, and her fragile flesh and bone to satisfy her scientific curiosity. Of how she sought true love and happiness despite her lamentable eccentricities, and of her thrilling expedition to the perilous mountains of Vistrana, where she made the first of many historic discoveries that would change the world forever. It just says great things about a book when the beginning is so boring that the narrator thinks that they have to start. There's like a little thing here also that's from the beginning of the book, where you, dear reader, continue at your own risk. It is not the faint of heart. No more so than the study of dragons itself. But such study offers rewards beyond compare. To stand in a dragon's presence, even for the briefest of moments, even at the risk of one's life, is a delight that, once experienced, can never be forgotten. And after that, in the book, she goes on for some time about, now that she's, super published and famous and respected and blah, 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 and all her exploits, and then the book immediately moves on to her childhood. And you just know whenever a book starts with like huge bragging like that it's going to be a slog before anything interesting happens. You know what I mean? Because they know their beginning is boring, so they got to start out with something. So a word before I get into the book itself. I just want to say, as I always say, I'm not here to just flame stuff. I understand writing a book is hard, and I want to understand what it is that I liked or disliked, and why that's different from 10,000 people's other, from the experience of 10,000 other people. But also it's fun to make fun of stuff. So, also, there are going to be spoilers. I'm going to assume that either you have read this book and you want to hear my thoughts, or you don't care and you just want to hear me complain about something, which more power to you. I would say, in a sentence, book 1 of The Natural History of Dragons, I would say Scooby-Doo that doesn't think it's Scooby-Doo. And let's get into it. First, I'll talk a little bit about the characters, then the plot, the world building, and then we're continuing with our new segment in which I dive into the cesspit that is Goodreads for your entertainment value. And then we will conclude with my overall thoughts about the book. Okay, let's get started with the characters. Our main character is Isabella, or Lady Trent, as she will be known, but not in this book. On the one hand, I appreciated that we have a sort of, and she almost seems neurodiverse coded to me, even if it's not explicitly said. And I appreciated that we have that as the narrator who's experiencing emotion and romance and attraction in a way that we don't often see, especially in young women protagonists. But, oh boy, is she just unbearable. I think, first of all, this is the primary example of an author not being able to write a character smarter than them. Because, oh boy, does this author want us to think that this character is a genius, and she is so dumb. On the one hand, I get it. She's 19 and an intellectual and sheltered, but come on. So soon into the book, she's in a foreign land where she says she can barely speak the language, and she runs out in the middle of the night wearing a nightgown chasing strangers. That just defies stupidity. even worse than that is when she forgets the note that she leaves when she crashes into their hideout, and then she writes a little note like, sorry, didn't mean to. And then she forgets that she leaves a note, and the entire time you're reading, after that, the dragon attacks, the mysterious super dragon, whatever, starts showing up, and you're just like, does she not remember the note that no. And then you get to the end and she's like, oh yeah, I did forget that note that I left. And you're just like, oh my God. And her inability to solve this Scooby-Doo ass mystery. She is an insufferable rich lady. She's just privileged and whiny. And for example, when she's whining about their accommodations and how they don't have the proper furniture or whatever, it's like, boo frickin' who, you rich bitch. I also really did not like the she's not like other girls trope that was so heavy with her. She very clearly says several times things along the lines of, well, all the other girls liked dressing up, but I didn't. Did not like those frivolous and stupid things. And you're like, stop being mean to other girls. Other girls are great. Don't worry, she likes dragons and dirt and cool stuff. This is one of the tropes that I hate most out of any tropes in literature. I hate it so much. Also, on this topic, why are we still doing, I guess it's 2014, but even 2014, why are we still doing the whole woman who is so much better than all other women has to show cartoonishly sexist men that she's worth something, and therefore her inferior peers might be worth something too. Overall, I found her to be insufferable, obnoxious, unkind, unbearably stupid, And I did not think that having the older narrator looking back on her life choices improved it in any way, which I will get back to when I'm talking about the plot. Even though she sort of lampshades her stupidity, the author lampshades, the character's making these stupid choices. Anyway, I'll get back to that. Then there's her husband, Jacob, who I guess existed. And when he died, I was so surprised, given that on the cover of the book, it said her name is Lady Trent, and that is not his name or title. So when he died, I was like, oh my God, I'm so surprised. And there's the expedition guy who also existed. And then there was the poor expedition guy who I actually kind of felt sorry for. It was the closest we ever get to an acknowledgement that class played a factor in the way that all these people were treated, and that she was rich and therefore privileged and had opportunities that poorer women and men did not have. Those opportunities were left, unresolved. And then I will say Dagmara, however you pronounce her name, she was the only character I actually liked. Although I kind of found her, she's like a walking stereotype of the wise native, whatever. Those are all the characters I remember because I don't remember any of the characters from this book other than the narrator. Now, moving on to the plot. In 2 words, I can summarize the entire plot of this book. Scooby-Doo. It was a guy in a mask all along. There, I said it. So there are a couple different elements of this book that I'm going to discuss. So first of all, the romance. I didn't actually mind that it was so fast and bam, they're married. But to be honest, I thought the whole first part about her childhood was very useless, did not contribute anything to the plot or the forward motion of the story, and could have been cut. It added nothing. And then through all the courting and all that, why is this? All of that. It could have just been, I collected sparklers as a kid and my dad was mean but also kind of nice, and then I married this guy and we went on an expedition, and here we are on the expedition. Why could we not have started with her going on the expedition? The biggest problem with this book's plot, well, one of them, there is absolutely no tension pulling this narrative forward. I had to push myself through. There's no dramatic tension. You're not really worried about the characters. The mystery is ridiculous, and as the reader, you're like, it is so obvious. How do these characters not realize yet? There's no curiosity, about, what are the dragons like? There's just nothing. The choice to have an older narrator really robbed it a lot of those things, especially the tension. And then the stuff at the beginning when she's like, yes, I am the greatest naturalist of all time. You might know my reputation. So I was like, okay, so obviously this expedition is going to be successful enough that she keeps doing them. Thanks for robbing it of all dramatic tension whatsoever. And then, like I said, with the mystery and the note, I had an aneurysm. It was unbelievable. And then all of a sudden, so it's like the guy in a costume. It's like, yeah, no shit. And then all of a sudden, it's the Boyars men, and we were expected, we've been introduced to him in the 3rd act, and all of a sudden, he was the villain all along. And you're like, that was very good foreshadowing. Excellent. Very good. And his evil plan, what even was his evil plan? Was he gonna take dragon bones and build stuff? That is not, what? That's the dumbest evil plan I've ever heard in my life. This is also an example of a story where the too stupid to live female main character, by dint of sheer stupidity, manages to propel the plot forward. Or more properly speaking, she has no agency, so her stupidity gives the illusion that she's doing something to move the plot forward when she's not. Authors, why do we keep doing this? Our smart female main characters can be smart and not clumsy, or utterly moronic and out to win a Darwin Award. This is not necessary, even though the author lampshades it. It's like, you're still doing it. And lastly, with regards to the plot, where are the dragons? You have like 2 seconds with dragons in this book and they shoot one and then it's dead. Which, whatever. That's all I have to say about the Scooby-Doo plot. Onto the world building. I found this world building to be incredibly lazy. She just changed the name of Victorian European countries so she could use stereotypes and not have to do research into actual customs, language, history, geography, religion, and instead just use somewhat offensive stereotypes. Cool. Like Scareland is England, Vistrana is Russia, or maybe Poland. Cool. Where are the dragons? The religion is just Judaism with different names, and I don't know how to feel about it. One of the reviews I read, I'm not going to mention it, but it did mention that, maybe it's, a little bit, how she treats Judaism. As if Western Europe, based on Judaism and not Christianity, would just end up with Victorian Britain and Judaism the exact same as it was at that time anyways. And the whole colonial thing felt kind of gross. I did not like the way they treated the Vistrani people. And it wasn't even done in a self-aware way. Like the old narrator never intervened and was like, I mean, she did. She just didn't do it enough and was like, yeah, I was a real jerk to these people. And I was very patronizing and rude. So let us move on to some reviews. As I said, I, for your entertainment value, have waded into the cesspit that is Goodreads so that we might find the most humorous gems among them. And also, I would just like to say I generally try to write my own thoughts and opinions before I go to the Goodreads because I don't want them to bias what I'm going to say, because sometimes the reviewers bring up a lot of different points that I didn't bring up. Which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this section. And sometimes they're just very pithy and funny, which is another reason that I'm doing this section. Here we go. Leah says, it was so boring. The dragons are tangential to the story at best. They shoot one, and then there's something about preserving dragon bones. Snooze. Morgan says, if you're looking for a book about dragons, or even one that focuses on the subject, read something else. Isabella's chief personality trait seems to be xenophobia. I understand that she is from a very sheltered background in what seems to be a very Eurocentric culture, but she spends a lot of time critiquing the Vistrani people with whom she is staying. She reduces their religion to superstition, repeatedly critiques the woman helping her for not being a proper lady's maid, and only begrudgingly acknowledges that she is a stranger in this land. Jillian says, I will never understand why in a fantasy book, when you can invent anything or anyone, why the author would invent a world with fantasy racism. Claudia says, the most boring and snobbish book I've read since high school curricula. A woman who portrays another woman so clumsily, so selfishly, so ignorantly is annoying, and it took all the nerves in my body not to throw this book into the fire. Melanie says, not enough dragons! I don't care about finding a dumb husband! And I think there's 7 exclamation points after that. Jason says, from kidnapping hijinks to ruins and caves and a mysterious supernatural demon dragon that haunted the small bands of lords and lady who went a-dragon hunting, it seemed more Scooby-Doo than anything else. And that's the shame of it too. It had such potential, but was so overwrought that any fantasy fan worth their salt would turn up their nose at this tome. And I have to say, I was like, that's what I said, Jason! Kyle says, bored rich people decide to go and make life difficult for the natives because they're bored. I'm not quite bored enough to continue this series. I feel you, Kyle. And lastly, we have Brooke, who says, have you seen the movie How to Train a Dragon? Well, this book is like that, except for there is no charming, clever main character, and the world building is a lazy Victorian replica, and the ending is extremely anticlimactic. Thank you for those reviews. They were lovely. So, to conclude, overall, I would say, oh my god, this book was a snore and a chore. Do not make me read the rest of the series. I will fall asleep at the wheel and die. How was this nominated for a Hugo? Who are the people who nominate Hugos, and why is this what they think the best book of the year? What? Where are the dragons? Where? This is one of several books I've read recently. This might be part of why I'm peeved at it, where we have just the most cartoonishly sexist world you can imagine. And A, kind of makes modern feminists look like fine, whiny little brats, which they are not. They are talking about real problems. But when you have like a privileged, whiny little brat like Isabella as your main character whining about feminism, it kind of makes us all look bad. But also, kind of echoing what one of the reviewers said, I am of the opinion that I read for pleasure, for entertainment, to escape from this world, you know, because it sucks. And I don't want to have to read about a world where everyone is sexist. Why, if we can have all the power in the world over creating a magical new world, why are we gonna make one that's racist and sexist in the same way that our world is? Like, why is that fun? And why are we doing that? Why can't we invent better worlds, or worlds that are at least bad but in a different way? In conclusion, Marie, I mean this in the nicest way. You need Alec, because M.A. Carrick together produces quite good work, I will begrudgingly admit, and 1 star. That's all I have to say about this Scooby-Doo-ass adventure. No hatred to Scooby-Doo. I love Scooby-Doo, but it's a children's cartoon, and this is supposedly a very serious fantasy book for adults. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of I Hated That Book. Let me know if you would like me to review what book you would like me to talk about next. If you want me to talk about your book, your favorite book, your least favorite book, a book you had to read in school, anything. I'm open to anything. I'm an equal opportunity critic. You can also find me on Instagram now. I Hated That Book _podcast is my new handle. Check out my dank memes that I post. Is that something the kids are saying these days? Dank memes? I don't know. I'm not a kid anymore. I've identified very strongly with Sophie Hatter, and I'm like a 90-year-old woman on the inside, and I have been since I was 4. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of I Hated That Book, and we'll see you next time.